Good night, Davey. So someone else might be coming, actually. Someone's dialed. Oh yeah, so do you guys have any questions from last time? No? All good?
It's hard to actually cram all that.
Yeah, no, I don't expect you to cram it. Because like, as I was saying, even I copy-paste sometimes.
Yeah.
If I haven't used that line of code in a while, I'm not going to remember how to write it.
While I was driving, actually recalling what task and I got to that API.
Yeah, I mean, from last time, the only important things that you need to think about is multi-threading. Like sometimes it's automatically done for you. Sometimes you have to do it yourself. Like you have to change threads yourself. And then the other important thing is going into a JSON file and like navigating through it and parsing your data.
That was actually easy. The way that company had.
Yeah. It could be a lot more challenging. Although, like, I don't think you would find an API that has so many levels. Because if they had so many levels, like if it's a really big company, then they'll have different URLs that provide different data. Like how Flickr had like 1 million different methods.
Yeah.
So like the levels of the JSON tree wouldn't be too like deep. So yeah, it probably wouldn't. Okay, it might get more complicated than that, but I would say like that's average.
JSON API will always be.
So it can be in JSON or XML, which is similar.
For the application, I understand XML we can use for databases.
Yeah.
But for iOS, Swift.
You can use XML, yeah. You can actually parse any file format. If you know how it looks, you can parse anything, even if it's like KML, which is similar to XML. Even if it was in
CSV.
Now CSV, that's the what is that? A spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's like.
I've never done that before, but
it's probably way.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how is this? Can a CSV be represented with dictionaries and arrays?
It'd be too hard in this.
That's why you can't level out. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a table.
Like single record.
Yeah. But for us,
maybe
lots of auto dealer data.
Yeah.
And lots of this auto dealership data is all.
Oh, I have an idea. Maybe like to access a cell, you just need the row number and column number. And so like the same way you access a dictionary using the key would be row number, column number. And then you get the cell.
Where would you post that CSV?
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about today, like how you use Parse server, same way. Okay, cool, let's start. I think, did I send you guys the stream? I think Vince wants to watch it. Oh no, it's here. All right, cool. Okay, so Parse and CocoaPods. We've talked about these briefly, like in the first week. So I'll give you guys a little introduction again. First, storing data. So far, we haven't been storing data at all, because by storing or persisting is the more technical term. We mean that the data should be available across sessions. So if you shut your app down or like it crashes, you should still be able to see the data the next time you run it. We haven't been doing that so far. All we've been doing is creating these local data structures that terminate once your app closes. Okay? So we're not going to be talking about how to persist data locally. There's a few different ways you could do that. I'm not going to talk about that. You guys don't need to know this for this course, but if you guys want to know about it, I can tell you guys like after the lecture's done. Okay, so we're going to be using the cloud to persist our data. So we're using this thing called a backend as a service, otherwise known as a BaaS. And yeah, these are different examples. Firebase is Google's, CloudKit is Apple's, Azure is Microsoft's. They all have their own backend as a service. And yeah, Parse used to be Facebook's, but now we're using the free open source version of that because Facebook shut it down.
Firebase.
Sorry?
Firebase is Google?
Yeah, Firebase is Google's. And actually, that's my favorite one. I think it's the best one to use. I don't know why we're using Parse Server. I can show you guys how to use Firebase as well. Cool. So yeah, Facebook decided it's run its course, so they didn't want to continue with the service. And so some guys copied all the code, made it open source, so you can contribute to it and upgrade it. And I think it's free. Yeah, it's basically free. The only problem is that you have to host it somewhere, and that's why we downloaded Heroku. So yeah, Parse Server has to be deployed to a platform as a service. Now that platform as a service we're using is called Heroku, and Heroku needs to have Node.js, which is an environment that allows JavaScript code. Don't worry about all these terms. I'm gonna. Sorry? Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Right. So all these AASs. So we have to think about two for now, like in this course: a cloud platform as a service and Parse, the backend as a service. So, as I was saying, Heroku uses Node.js. Do you guys know what JavaScript is? It's what most web browsers use to run websites, okay? And so that's basically what Heroku is doing. It's running a bunch of JavaScript code. Now, I had to include that because Parse Server only works in JavaScript. So you can only use platform as a service. You can only use a platform as a service if it runs Node.js. You guys don't need to think about this for this course, but I think it's interesting. It's good to know that you can only use Parse Server on platforms where they have Node.js because this thing uses JavaScript. Cool. So yeah, and on Heroku, you can run pretty much you can host anything. It doesn't have to be Parse Server. You can host other backends or pretty much.
How is it? How is this version?
I've never used AWS. You mean Amazon Web Services? Yeah, I've never used that one, so I can't really compare it. But Amazon Web Services is really big. I would call that a cloud platform as a service that has its own backend as a service, and it has a lot of other services in it. So, oh really? Yeah. So, use it.
Oh, me too. The bill is huge. That's why I was. Right? Yeah.
So I would say Amazon Web Services is more like a software as a service, which we'll get into. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, software as a service. We'll start on the right. You're given everything. You don't need to build anything yourself. I think that's AWS is similar to that. I haven't used it, so I can't be 100% sure. And then we have platform as a service, which is like Heroku. You're given all the infrastructure, and you're given the main ingredients, which is that Java time a JavaScript runtime environment. That's like the pizza dough in this case. Like that's the main thing you need to use it. And so yeah, think of Heroku as this, and then a kitchen as a service, infrastructure as a service would be something like Heroku. I don't know any examples of this, but something like Heroku, but where you would be able to like use any language, like, and you'll be able to host any backend depending on the language you're using. So yeah, it's a little less sophisticated than Heroku, like than a platform, and obviously that allows for a lot more variation. And then yeah, this is like if you're not using any services, you have to build everything from scratch. Like you need to host everything yourself. You need to build the host. You need to build the server, and pretty much everything's done from the ground up. So it's always better to use like a platform as a service or a backend as a service, just to make things faster. Anyways, you guys don't really need to know this. I just thought it's good to know. These are some examples. Yeah, so Heroku's up there as a platform. Firebase, which is the one I use, and Parse server are backends as a server, meaning they're only going to be storing your data, and they can maybe compute a few cloud functions. And then software as a service, like everything is done for you. So like the Facebook website itself would be software as a service, because you don't need to know any programming to use it.
What is IaaS?
So infrastructure as a service. So something less complex than Heroku, where you're able to use your own environment. In Heroku, we're using Node.js. That's why it qualifies as a platform as a service. Okay? So don't worry about that if you don't understand. Cool. So yeah, Parse server gives us a few things. We can easily, I have to reiterate this, you can easily store and retrieve data. Okay? You can add some cloud functions, things that maybe are too complex or would take too long to compute on your phone. You could do them on the cloud, and you do that on Parse server. I'll give you an example. Suppose you have like a lot of data and you want to filter through it to find, so if we have a lot of data, if we have a lot of users, and we wanted to find a user that has the first name Dennis, okay? If you had 1 million users, you don't want to do that on your phone, because it's just going to take up too much processing power. So you'd want to do that on Parse server. So it offers like a few functions that you can do like that. And it also gives you a toolkit which you install into your app. And that toolkit gives you access to all the functions that you can use. And yeah, we'll be looking more at that today, like how to use the toolkit in our app. And also, there's a nice dashboard. You'll see, I don't know if you guys saw that in the first week, but you can look at the analytics of your app. You can obviously see the data. You can see all your user data. You can like easily block users from there, for example. And you can send push notifications through there if you wanted to send manual notifications to a user. And yeah, cool. So you guys probably remember this, how to use Heroku and Parse server. I'll just show you guys briefly. Okay, Heroku first. Okay, I'm not going to go to Heroku. You guys already did this, so I don't want to waste time. To go to your Parse server, there's a link or a URL in the assignment that tells you exactly what to type out. But it's your app ID name. So mine was Sanjay selfiegram.herokuapp.com/dashboard. And that's all you need. So I'm going to remove this last part. So that's how to get to your Parse server dashboard. Okay. Again, the URL is in your assignment. So type that in. And then you'll be asked to sign in. I hope you guys saved your credentials. Otherwise, you might have to deploy a new app. Because I tried looking for ways where you could retrieve your password, but I couldn't find any way to do that. So this is the dashboard. You'll see all your apps listed here. I only have one. Click on that. And then here is where we'll see all our data, all our users. This is how you can send notifications to people. Yeah, and a bunch of other things that I don't use because I only used Parse when I did this course. I'll show you Firebase, which is almost the same thing, but I think it's better, it looks better, and it works better. So I'll go to an app of mine. Cool. So yeah, here I can see some analytics. If I go to authentication, I can see all the users. I can change like the sign-in method from email password to like Facebook or however I want users to sign up. I can see all my files, like these are going to be images. And here I can write cloud functions, the functions I don't want users to be computing on their phone. And there's also a machine learning part, which I've not used. Okay. So going back to Parse, you guys are going to be using this part today. Like over here, you'll have your user class and your post class. Oh, missed call. Okay, so if you guys are lost, just look in this left panel and you'll be able to navigate to wherever you want to go. Okay. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, how are we supposed to use this in our app? And it's quite easy, actually. Let me expand this. Okay, connecting it to your app. So, first thing, you guys have probably seen the app delegate file, yeah? Don't look for it right now, but I just want to tell you something about it. So your app delegate file is the most important file on your app, because without it, your app would not even run. All your view controller files are optional. Like if you don't have a view controller file, yeah, that view controller wouldn't show up, but you could replace that view controller file with another view controller file. You can't replace this app delegate file. It's like completely necessary for your app to work. It also contains information about your whole app. It knows about the different view controllers. It knows about the different classes and pretty much everything. So in that file, we have a method called didFinishLaunchingWithOptions. And this is like the first method that runs when your app gets launched. If you didn't have a storyboard, and even if you didn't have that initial view controller in your storyboard, this thing still runs, because this runs before any UI or anything else. So make sure that you don't tamper with this unless you know what you're doing. Otherwise, when you run your app, you might not see anything. Okay, but this is where we're going to be signing into Parse, because we could also sign in to Parse like when our first view controller loads, but typically we set it up in this method. Yeah, just so that like we're absolutely sure that we're connected to Parse server. And you guys are going to see this code that's in white in your assignment, so don't worry if you can't understand it. I'll just go through it quickly. Here you're setting up a configuration that has your app ID name and your server name. Like those are two of the fields you entered when you signed up for Parse server. You should have saved them. So those are only two things you need to set up the configuration. When you've done that, you simply have to say parse initialize with that configuration. So simple, okay? From then, you have access to your whole database and your files and everything that's online. So yeah, so we're gonna get to that next. So yeah, once you've set it up, then you can do anything. You can add users, you can sign in, you can add data, or yeah, that is gonna be next. Before we get to authentication, we're gonna add data to the database, because you don't technically need to be signed up or logged in to add data unless you specify so on the dashboard. Like there'll be certain rules you can use, like saying only logged in users can post data, or anyone can retrieve data. Because some apps, like you don't need to log in to see stuff, right? But if you want to make a comment or if you want to add your own post, you'll need to log in. So you can edit those rules accordingly. For now, we're going to keep everything public, so we can upload data without signing in, and we can also download data without signing in. So now the important thing to remember here is that we have our user class and we have our post class, but we can't directly upload those. We have to convert them to a PF object, which is what Parse understands. So for example, our post object needs to be converted into a PF object before we upload it. This is a small example of uploading an object called food1, which is of class type food. Okay, you don't actually need to have this in your app. You can make this up, and you'll see the results in the dashboard. You'll see on the dashboard I've created a new class called food, and there's an object called food1. The food1 only has one property under its name, which is tacos. So you don't need to have that data stored in your app, but eventually you'll want to be connecting your current data with Parse server, so then you wouldn't be like hard coding all this, okay? This is just an example of how you're gonna save the data online. And yeah, this is also an important thing, save in background. Just like how the data task doesn't start unless you say task resume, same thing. You have to call this save in background thing. Okay, now retrieving data. Any questions so far? Okay, retrieving data is very similar, but instead of creating a PF object, you have to create a query. And those of you who've done databases, who've worked on databases before, probably knows what a query is. Yeah, so you specify the conditions of your query. In this case, the property name needs to be tacos, and so we're gonna get the result is gonna have one object, which is food1 from here. And again, this line is important because it actually computes the task. Now here we have a handler, just like how we had a handler. I would say handler is the same thing as a completion block. You guys saw that on Monday when we were downloading stuff from Flickr. There was this whole block that executes when the data is retrieved. And so that's the handler. It's the completion block. And I'm going to go through that next. I think it's in the next one. Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to this. So yeah, this is the handler. From this curly bracket to this curly bracket. Everything that's happening there is happening after the data has been retrieved. So going back, remember that everything's happening over the network, so you need to have things are being done on separate threads. Okay. Now you can either switch between threads manually, just like how this method you used last time does it. It automatically switches to the network thread. This one also does that. This find objects in background switches to the network thread. And so I made the asynchronous term bold. You guys need to remember that all this is happening asynchronously. So if it doesn't matter what lines, like what your lines are looking like, it's not going to happen in that order. And yeah, so now we're on the network thread. We've called this thing inside the handler. We're in the network thread. Last time, to go back to the main thread, you guys used that method called operation queue main add operation. Or I showed you another way to do it, dispatch queue main async. That's how you get back to the main thread. Or this is another way to do it, using a callback. Actually, that's not, I'm not supposed to tell you guys about that. Okay. 1 second. Okay, so just remember this, like, you guys need to go back to the main thread if you're making UI changes, yeah? Because UI can only be updated on the main thread. Over here, we're doing a print statement. It doesn't need to be on the main thread. We can leave it in the background thread. It's still going to show in the console because the console is not UI. And so as I said, everything that's happening in this completion block is happening after that find objects query has been completed. So this print statement is going to print the right result, okay? Takeaway is we have completion blocks that execute when the function is over. All right, so PF objects. As I was saying, everything that's uploaded to Parse has to be in this class called the PF object. It's not going to understand any other class. So it's similar to how the format of API endpoints are, like API data. It's all dictionaries and arrays and integers and strings, okay? And they can also contain PF relations, which is basically a reference to another PF object. So yeah, like that's how this is kind of a relational database, because you have these relations. It's technically not a relational database because if you update, suppose you have two PF objects. You have a dog and a person, okay? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, so if you have a dog and a person, each dog has one owner, the person, and a person may have multiple dogs. So suppose you get a new dog and you say, okay, the owner is person 1. In Parse server, person 1, that object, is not going to know there's a new dog he has, because it's not technically a relational database. But here we're storing that relation as something called a PF relation. And so every time we update one of those objects, we have to update the other one as well. With the new, like, we'll have to update that PF relation property. Okay. Again,
relation property is part of.
Yeah, it's like a reference between the two. So PF users are also a pre-made class from Parse server, and they pre-made this because like pretty much every app is going to have a user with similar properties. Like there's going to be a username, password, maybe a phone number, email address, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it also comes with convenience methods like signing in, logging out, reporting, forgetting your password. And yeah, so it's a very convenient thing to use. And you just have to subclass. It's basically a subclass of PF object. So you're going to be using PF user today because you're going to be saving your profile data to Parse server. So you'll need to be converting your user class into a PF user class. And then this is the third subclass. Yeah, second subclass that we're going to be learning about. It's a PF file. Just like how JSON trees can't save your images. Also, your Parse server database can't store your images. You need to have a reference to it, just like how we constructed that URL to lead us to the image. Here, we can create the URL ourselves. It doesn't have to have that farm ID, server ID, whatever. You can create the URL yourself however you want it. And then it's going to redirect you to where the image is. So just like how the Flickr API works, it's a similar thing. And then your file actually gets saved somewhere else on Parse server, part of the storage. It's not part of the database itself. You're just going to have a reference from that database. Okay, so that's why you guys created that URL, that image URL property, because when you upload your post to the Parse server, you're going to be uploading that image URL, and the actual photo itself will be stored somewhere else on Parse server. Cool. Now, there's one more thing. You guys, I know Galia asked me this last time, why are we converting an image to data? So every time we want to add a PF file, we have to convert that UI image to NS, it's called NS data, which is basically data. You have to convert it to data first and then into a PF file. You can't go directly from a UI image into a PF file because, yeah, PF files, it's easier for them just to accept one kind of class, and that's NS data. And you can pretty much convert anything into an NS data. So it's a two-step process. Convert the UI image into NS data and then that into a PF file. And the same thing when you're retrieving the data, the PF file into a NS data class and then into your UI image. Everyone good with that? Cool. Okay, so that's all you guys need to know about, like the high level of Parse. Okay, I'm going to show you exactly what code to write so you guys don't get lost. But before we do that, we need to talk about CocoaPods, because if you guys remember, CocoaPods is the reason we can use Parse server in our app. CocoaPods is a dependency manager, meaning it handles your frameworks for you. It also, the other side of CocoaPods is that it also has a huge library of different frameworks available online. And Google actually made it its official way of distributing its frameworks. So like if you want to get a Google Maps framework, you would have to get it from CocoaPods. If you wanted to get a something else Google, you would have to get it from CocoaPods. Okay, so it's a really big thing. Most big frameworks will be found there. Yeah, and again, Apple frameworks are available through Xcode, so it's only for third-party frameworks. Pros: it saves you time and brain power because you don't have to write all that stupid code. And cons, you can probably imagine, like you don't know what's going on in those frameworks, and so if something's not working and there's poor documentation, and yeah, if you're getting unexpected results, like it's gonna be difficult to debug. So make sure you're using something that's well documented, so if you run into problems, you'll be able to fix it. Okay, so the steps for using a pod. In this case, Parse is installed with a pod. So the steps are, first download CocoaPods, which you guys did. Okay, then in your project folder, you have to initialize a pod file using this command, pod init. I'm going to go through this again, and this will all be in your assignment in the instructions. And then once you've made your pod file, you open it with a text editor and you just add the name of the pod. So in our case, we're just going to be writing pod parse in quotations. That's all you have to do. You go back to terminal and say pod install, and it installs the whole framework for you. You don't have to worry about anything else. Okay, now whenever you install a pod, whichever pod it is, your Xcode is going to generate a new file which has the extension XC workspace. Your Xcode project doesn't know anything about your pods, so like if you try to use Parse in your Xcode project extension, it wouldn't detect what Parse is. So you have to close that window, and open your app again with the new file. There will be a new file generated. Okay. So usually, like when you do this, like when you add pods or anything third party, you should generally like clean and build your app. Otherwise, there might be like some links missing. So it's always good to clean and build. Or a shortcut to clean build the whole folder is Alt-Shift-Command-K. I'll send that to you guys if you guys can't remember that. Okay, so let me show you guys how to add a pod now. Okay, so we're here. Oh my god, I can't read this. I don't think I can even make this bigger. Let's see. Text size, change. 11 is the biggest? No ways. 15. I'll do 20. Okay. You guys can't read this, right? I'm guessing you can't. What if I close it and open it again? Okay, there, it's bigger, it worked. Can you guys read this now? Yeah? So I'm gonna go to my folder. Where is it? Test apps. Okay, so once you navigate to your folder, don't worry about the ZSH thing, that's just the theme I use. So we're in the folder. First thing we have to do is pod init. Now I already did this earlier, so it's going to tell me you already have a pod file. Existing pod file found in directory, okay? Otherwise, it would generate the pod file for you, and you can go to that folder in your Finder. And you'll see it here, okay? So now, you'll see this file. You open it with a text editor. I would suggest not to use text edit because it changes the file extension. So if you use text edit, make sure you change the file extension back to like a blank. It shouldn't have anything at the end of pod file. Okay. If you have another text editor you like I use Atom, you can use that. So Atom is opening somewhere else now. Where are you? All right, here it is. Hurry up. Here we go. So you'll see it's going to look like this, okay? One side, yeah, there you go. This is how your empty pod file looks. Oh my god, you guys can't see this. Anyways, all you have to do is type pod, your name of your pod, Parse, and hit enter, or you don't even need to hit enter. Click save and close it, okay? That is going to be in your assignment guidelines, so don't worry if you didn't see that. Close this. Now you go back to terminal and you have to install that pod. So your pod file knows what pod you want, but it hasn't installed it yet. So to install it, you write pod install. And it's going to say you already have this pod, so it's not going to update it. If there was a new version, it would update it automatically. So you wait for that.
You're in the directory now where you're.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the root directory. All right. Yeah, pod installation complete. There's one dependency, which is Parse, and there's 2 pods installed. This bolts one, which is an automatic thing. I didn't install that myself. It just gets installed. Right. So now that it's successful, we can go to our folder again, and we'll see this file, this workspace file. Okay, the difference is it's a white background. This Xcode proj is a blue background. So we open that. And it is here. Okay. So you'll be able to know that it's a workspace because you'll see the pods in the left panel. You'll see a pod file and a folder of the pods. Okay. So that's how you install it. I'm going to show you how to store data now. How much time do we have? Okay, good. Where are you? We need to make this bigger. Okay, you guys can read that, yeah? So this is our, I'm going to cut all this out for now. So this is how your app delegate file looks. It's got a bunch of empty methods. The only one that is doing something is this did finish launching with options method. And all it's doing is returning true, which means like this is gonna let your app load. Okay? In here, we want to do all the initial setup. So in this case, we want to initialize parse, and perhaps you could sign in here. Unless you want to have a sign-in view controller, then you'd have that code there. But for you guys, since like I guess you're the only person going to be using that app, you could sign in from here. First thing, remember I said, was we make the configuration with your ID and your server URL, and then you initialize it. We can run the app, but you won't see any changes in the dashboard. It's just going to look empty, okay? Oh, wrong one. No, where are you? Oh, here we are. So that's easy. It's easy to initialize it. Now we're going to move on to adding an object. Just like I showed you in the slides, you create a PF object like that, just the same way you'd create a post object. But right now, the only parameter we need is the class name. So this could be like post. Okay. There. So when in our which controller is it? I think do you guys know where you're going to be creating your posts? Is it in the newsfeed controller where you have that camera button at the top? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it is.
It is there. So that's where you'll be adding new posts. Okay, yeah. So this is where you're going to create this new PF object. When that camera button is clicked, you're going to choose your image, and then remember the UI image picker controller uses that did finish picking media method. That's when it knows your image. And so somewhere in there, you'll be creating this PF object with your class name post. So you do that, you say let test object equals that. You give it its properties and its values. So our post has there's a caption or there's a name. I don't know what's there, but I'll do one thing. So you'll be like test object caption, whatever the user wants to enter. So it could be a variable from before. I'm gonna just give it a hard-coded string. Let's say Pano. I think I'm in my Pano. No, I'm not in that app. Anyways. Third thing, save in background. And because this is a network call, it's creating a new thread for us, but we're given this completion block. This can be called anything, but I'll leave it as block for now. Where in this completion block, this print statement is going to execute when this object has been saved. Okay, and we're given two things to work with. We're given the success boolean and an error, which is an optional, because if success is true, error will be nil. So this is how you write your variables in a completion block. Usually, or like for now, you guys are not going to be defining these methods, so you wouldn't be able to choose what parameters or what variables you have here. They'll just be given to you. But later on, if you're going to be creating your own methods that work in between threads, you'll want to have suitable variables here that you can work with when something's finished. In this case, we just want to know if it's complete, and if it wasn't complete, what was the reason. Okay? So void, you don't need it because we're not returning anything. Don't worry about the void. Like, you guys will see that. So it's going to say object has been saved. Let me run this just to show you guys. Run. We're launching. Attaching things. And it's running. Okay, so you guys can't see my simulator. It's on this screen, but where is it? There. This is from like 2 weeks ago when I was just creating a table view with names of lakes. Okay, so the app is run. So that means you know this did finish launching with options method has run, because you can see your first view controller. So if we go to our dashboard on Parse and we refresh, we'll be able to see on the left side are the new class we've just uploaded, post. And it's giving it an automatic ID because we didn't give it one. And here we can see the property we added called caption with Pano. Oh, there we go. Caption is the property name, and Pano was the value I gave it. Okay? So yeah, like over here you'll see all your classes. Cool. Everyone get that? Everyone good with that? Yes, no? Yeah, you'll understand it better. So one last thing I wanted to show you. Similar concept, but I'll just give you guys one more example. Or do you guys want to try it out on your own? These. So you could do this manually from here, but typically you wouldn't be doing that. You'll be, as I said, over here. When we create a PF object, we say it's class. If there's no class called post already in your dashboard, it'll create a new one. If there is already one, like say I do this again and I have a new test object, one, yeah, and this one has the same property but a different name, like slow-mo. Okay, if I run this again, you'll see that a new class hasn't been created, but there'll be 2 rows when it runs. So in like 10 seconds. Okay, so I think you guys get that. I wanted to show you guys how to sign in, but it's essentially the same thing. You create a PF user object, and okay, there it's loaded. So if we refresh, yeah, see another row, and this time the caption property has this value. I mean slow-mo. Cool. All right. So this is the code to create a user. Like I haven't used Parse in a long time, so I had to copy it, but I'll space it out a little better. So you create your user. This time there's no class name because PF user is a subclass already, and you can already see it here. Like there's no users because we haven't used it yet. So you create a PF user. You have to assign its properties, username and password. I'm not sure what else you get. User dot, let's see. Email, yeah, you can set its email. You can set it to if it's authenticated. Yeah, and then you're also given some methods. So once you've set its properties, we're going to sign him up. Again, it uses a completion block because it's a network call. So when it's done and if it's a success, we can do whatever we want with it. We can, over here, if we wanted to present this stuff in our profile view controller, we would have to go back to the main UI thread, right? You'll have to go like operation queue, main, add, and then you'd say in profile view controller, change name. Cool. Paul, you good? Dennis? Okay, sweet. So same way to log in. I'm not going to show you guys that. You guys should do that yourself. Anyways, that's all for the lecture. So you guys can start and go ahead with the assignment. No playgrounds again. You guys are done with them. Any questions? Yeah, it's pretty simple so far. I mean, it's just the code that you'll have to look at, like, and copy paste, because yeah, it's difficult to remember all of the codes, all of the lines, but pretty simple conceptually.